Hi ladies and gentlemen, this is Mr. Green and this is another in my series of AP Statistics lessons that we're going to be going through. We are still working our way through 7. I want to make certain you guys realize you should be done with 6. Do not keep some of that stuff hanging around. You want to get that taken care of. Working on Unit 7, we're in 7.4, so we're getting close to the end of Unit 7 here too. We're finishing up some concepts with hypothesis testing, and I want to make certain I cover just a topic that I've seen on the AP statistics test a couple of different times. Okay, error types. I've seen this one on a couple of different tests that we've talked about. The the different types of errors that we could be looking at is a type 1 error or a type 2 error. A type 1 error is rejecting a true hypothesis. Now, how do you remember whether it's a type 1 or a type 2 error? If you see the word rejecting a true hypothesis, it's one word, reject. It's a type 1. Type 2, not rejecting a false hypothesis. Not rejecting, 2 words. That's how come you'd know it's a type 2 error. What is the purpose of a type 1 and a type 2 error? It's the probability that you would actually get and make a mistake in what you're saying. So if we don't have a type 1 or a type 2 error, we are correct in what we're saying about our hypothesis and whether we reject it or not or reject it, right? So that would be a correct statement. These are rejecting a true hypothesis. In other words, we make a null statement and then we reject it for some reason, or we don't reject a false hypothesis, which would be incorrect. We don't want to do either one of those two things, okay? Which is worse? Well, it depends upon the situation. Given a decision, rule, or a significant alpha level, the probability that our significance test will reject a false null hypothesis when a particular alternative value is true is called the power of the test against that alternative. The power of the test is the probability against making a type 2 error. So this is the way we're going to calculate a type 2 error, okay? Is we're going to find this power of the test, okay? Because it's 1 minus that value. The probability of a type 1 error, that's alpha. That's where that's why we have that alpha value in the first place. So how do you find the probability that you get a type 1 error? That's what alpha is. So the probability of uh, getting that type 1, what is a type 1 again? Rejecting a true hypothesis. The probability that that occurred is whatever you have for your alpha value. The probability of a type 2, you have to have an alternative hypothesis value. So if your hypothesis value was that the mean was 30 and you come up with an alternative hypothesis of 32, that's what you would use to calculate the probability of your type 2 error. It's talked about in the book, so I'm not going to go into it too much here, okay? So it determines whether you have a type 2 error or not, or probability of having a type 2 error in your decision, okay? So thinking about that, that's a pretty good situation. You can figure out both of those two probabilities of either getting a type 1 or a type 2 error. So, the one thing they talk about in this one, the type 2 error, that would be, that's where you're rejecting the null hypothesis and it really should have been kept, okay? Did I say that right? You, you type 2, you're not rejecting a false hypothesis. Okay? So the probability of not rejecting that false hypothesis, it the actual probability here depends upon how far that alternative truly is from the one that you're saying is in the null hypothesis. Okay? It'll be greater the further away it is. So the probability of that one gets bigger. Now, here's the deal. You saw that little table that was in the thing. If you try to shrink the alpha, that causes the type 2 error probabilities to get bigger. And if you try to shrink the type 2 errors, that causes the type 1 errors to get bigger. Because honestly, it becomes a little box in which you got all four of them have to add up to 100% one way or the other. And so what you're looking at there is you can shrink one and cause the other one to get bigger, or shrink the other and cause one to get bigger. So what you are looking at is you really have to know your data and know which one you want to try to minimize, because it makes a huge difference in which way you go and how you set different values. Okay? Now, think about the justice system. If the null hypothesis is a person is not guilty until proven guilty, I mean, that's the way our justice system is based. Rejecting a null means finding someone guilty, right? Because you rejected that. So let's think about the case that's been very popular on TV recently, that Amanda Knox trial. That's that one in, she's from Italy and she was accused of murder, and they found her guilty, then they found her innocent, and then they found her guilty. Okay, it's Italy and their systems are not like ours, but the type 1 and type 2 errors are the same type of thing. So if they go through a trial, the type 1 error is finding her guilty and she's not, right? Because we're rejecting the null hypothesis. That means you find her guilty and she's truly not. A type 2 error would be finding her not guilty and she really is. As you can see in the Italian system, they're struggling with that. They've found her guilty, then not guilty, and then guilty again, and so they're struggling back and forth. So the question I'll ask you and let you all respond to it, and you can either do it in in the raise your hand, or you can talk about it in Class Connect. Which one's worse? If you were in the justice system, is rejecting the null hypothesis worse, or finding someone guilty and putting them in jail and they're not guilty worse? Hmm? I mean, there are lots of examples of this one. You rejected the null hypothesis that a person is not guilty, and you found them guilty and put them in jail, and then they do some testing later on, like some DNA testing, and they discover them not guilty, and then they spent several years in jail, and they weren't really guilty. Or is finding a person not guilty and they really are guilty worse? Hmm. Think about it. Let's talk about it in Class Connect. Okay? So, here we are. I do appreciate you guys letting me know that you are in AP statistics. When you are sending me K-mails, it really helps me answer your questions quicker. And I'll look forward to talking to you next time.